For nearly 20 years, the man sitting across from federal investigators had survived by following a single rule. In the violent world of cartel assassins, silence was everything. People who talked disappeared. Sometimes their families disappeared too. That rule had kept him alive through years of killings, cartel operations, and police investigations. Yet on this quiet afternoon, in a secure interrogation room surrounded by armed agents, something unexpected happened. The hitman who had protected cartel secrets for decades finally decided to speak. And the moment he did, investigators realized they might finally be looking at the ghost they had been chasing for years. For years, law enforcement agencies have been trying to identify a mysterious cartel enforcer, known only by the alias El Sombrero. Witnesses described a quiet figure wearing a hat who appeared shortly before executions took place. Survivors rarely remembered his face clearly, but they remembered the pattern. Whenever the man appeared, someone died. Investigators believed he worked as a contract killer for a powerful cartel operating along the U.S. Mexico trafficking corridor during the early 2000s. His job was simple. When the cartel needed a problem to disappear without attention, El Sombrero was sent to handle it. Unlike many cartel enforcers who relied on intimidation and violence, El Sombrero built a reputation for patience. He studied routines, watched his targets, and waited for the moment when everything lined up perfectly. According to investigators who later reconstructed his activities, he preferred quiet surveillance over reckless action. He watched targets for hours or even days before moving. The killings themselves were quick and efficient, which made him extremely valuable to the cartel leadership. For years, the strategy worked flawlessly, until one night when a small oversight began a chain reaction that would eventually expose him. The target that night was a former trafficker who had begun cooperating with authorities. Inside cartel culture, betrayal is considered one of the most serious crimes imaginable. Leadership decided that the man needed to be eliminated quickly and decisively to discourage others from doing the same. El Sombrero spent hours watching the quiet neighborhood as lights slowly turned off in nearby homes. By late evening, the street was silent. He approached the house calmly, completed the assignment in less than a minute, and disappeared into the darkness. At first, it looked like another perfectly executed cartel hit. What the hitman did not realize was that a small piece of evidence remained at the scene. At the time, investigators did not immediately recognize its significance. The item was cataloged and stored along with thousands of other pieces of evidence connected to cartel violence. For years it sat quietly inside a police archive, unnoticed and unimportant. Meanwhile, El Sombrero continued carrying out assignments for the cartel, unaware that a tiny mistake had already been recorded and preserved. As the years passed, the cartel organization that once protected him began to change. Leadership became more paranoid, and internal conflicts grew more frequent. Former allies began disappearing without explanation. Some were arrested by authorities, while others simply vanished. Within the cartel, loyalty was becoming increasingly fragile. The same people who once trusted each other now suspected betrayal everywhere. In an environment built on fear and suspicion, everyone understood that even the most loyal members could suddenly become expendable. By the late 2010s, international investigations were putting enormous pressure on cartel operations. Law enforcement agencies were coordinating raids, tracing financial networks, and arresting key members of the organization. The once powerful cartel structure began to fracture as arrests spread across multiple cities. Rumors circulated that certain leaders were quietly negotiating with investigators in order to reduce their own sentences. The silence that had once protected the entire organization was slowly beginning to crack. The turning point came when a powerful cartel leader was captured during a major law enforcement operation. This individual had deep knowledge of the organization's activities, including the identities of several enforcement operatives. Once news spread that the captured leader might cooperate with authorities, panic began spreading through the cartel network. Everyone understood the danger. Once one person started talking, the entire organization could unravel quickly. For El Sombrero, the situation became increasingly dangerous. He had spent years protecting the cartel's secrets, but now the people above him were facing the possibility of long prison sentences. If they decided to cooperate with investigators, they could easily shift blame onto the operatives who carried out the cartel's most violent assignments. In that scenario, the man who had spent years enforcing silence might suddenly become the easiest person to sacrifice. Eventually, investigators managed to bring El Sombrero into custody. When questioning began, agents expected the usual pattern of silence and denial. Instead, something unusual happened. The man who had protected cartel secrets for nearly 2 decades began revealing information that investigators had struggled to uncover for years. He described operations, locations, and individuals connected to multiple unsolved cases. One by one, details from long-standing investigations started falling into place. As investigators listened, they slowly began to understand the reason behind the confession. Inside cartel culture, loyalty lasts only as long as someone remains useful. Once suspicion appears, trust disappears quickly. The hitman had spent years protecting men who would likely abandon him if it meant protecting themselves. By the time he sat inside that interrogation room, he believed the organization had already written his fate. Speaking to investigators was no longer about betrayal. It had become a strategy for survival. Today, much of the information he provided remains sealed in federal case records. Authorities have confirmed that his testimony helped reopen multiple investigations tied to cartel violence. Several unsolved murders were finally connected to specific operations, giving investigators answers that had been missing for years. Yet even with those answers, one question continues to linger. The story leaves behind a powerful reminder about how cartel organizations truly function. Silence is supposed to protect everyone involved. It protects the leaders, the operatives, and the entire system built on fear and secrecy. But once that silence finally breaks, the structure holding everything together begins to collapse. And when that collapse starts, even the most loyal enforcers sometimes realize that the code they lived by was never designed to protect them at all.